In this video, I'm going to discuss compliance complexities, understanding the regulatory landscape for startups. Hello, I'm Jon Bassford. I'm the founder and CEO of Lateral Solutions, an operations management company specializing in launching and managing internal operations for startups, small businesses, and nonprofits. This is my YouTube series, Business Operations Insiders, where I give tips and advice on how you can streamline, enhance, and automate your internal operations. If you like these topics, please hit the subscribe button. So let's get into today's topic. Again, it is compliance complexities, understanding the regulatory landscape for startups. Now, first, we're talking about compliance, regulatory, legal issues. Let me say that although I do hold a law degree, I am not a licensed attorney. When hearing people talk about regulatory issues and legal issues, you should always talk to a licensed attorney when you're dealing with startups, dealing with your business, dealing with operations, to make sure that you're doing everything as legal and compliant as possible. So I always encourage you to talk to your attorney. And let me start with that. How do we choose an attorney? There's no shortage of attorneys in this world, as you know, given by how many legal jokes and lawyer jokes there are out there. But it is important to make sure that you are working with an attorney that you trust and that they work with you in the way that you need to be worked with. There are law firms that are big and bureaucratic. There are solo practitioners. There are even law firms that are designed to work specifically with startups. I actually partner with one of them. So make sure that you're finding an attorney or a law firm that operates the way you want to. As a startup, we're often strapped for cash, and you don't want to work with a law firm that is going to nickel and dime you on every little thing that you ask them about. So I do always encourage small businesses and startups to make sure they're working with an attorney that they understand how they bill and how they practice, to make sure that they're utilizing their resources as effective as possible in their legal endeavors without draining the bank. And even though I'm not a practicing attorney, and the fact that I do have a law degree, I certainly have a lot of experience working on legal matters with startups and small businesses. I have helped launch or relaunch over probably around 12 different organizations, both for-profit and nonprofit at this point. So I certainly have had my hand in the creation of many startups and handled the legal aspects of that. Again, always with an outside attorney, but it does help if you have someone on your staff that has some basic knowledge of legal function. Again, went to law school, graduated, have never practiced. Do I use my law degree every single day in the work I do for operations? Absolutely. From contract review to HR, etc. But it is important to make sure that you have someone with some basic knowledge of legal practices and legal structures, so that they can truly know, or at least know to the best of their ability, when they need to hand that over to an attorney. I think it's always important that every organization, startup, small business, nonprofit, has someone on staff that has some legal knowledge. It's vitally important having that person who, again, they're not going to represent you in court. They're not going to necessarily have the title of in-house counsel until you get to a certain size, certain level. But at least they have some basic knowledge where they can really quarterback the issues that come into your organization and help determine whether or not legal representation is needed or to be brought in for advice on that particular issue. I really strongly urge you that whenever you can, when your company is big enough, you have that operational person or someone on your staff that has that legal knowledge, because it can go a long way in saving your organization tens of thousands of dollars, if not more, by running to an attorney with every little problem that maybe it can just be handled internally. So now, let's talk about some of the legal issues that startups face. Obviously, the first one is the incorporation. There are many different ways to incorporate an organization and to have legal structure so that the business, the founders, the board, etc., are protected from any wrongdoing by the company. And a lot of times, just from lawsuits where there was nothing wrong to begin with, but you still have to contend with all those legal issues. So working with an attorney on your incorporation and how you set up your corporation is vitally, vitally important, from which states you're going to incorporate in, what that structure is going to look like. Now, I will admit that for my companies, and I own a couple, they're just single member LLCs. I do tend to use online platforms that allow you to really easily set up your business. But when you're talking about a startup that's going to have funders and investors and complex cap tables, you really want to make sure that you are working with an attorney that is experienced in working with startups to really help guide you to make sure that you're making the right decisions. This is one of those areas where if you don't set up your corporation correct in the very beginning, you're going to spend just as much money, if not double the money, redoing it down the road. So I really encourage you, make sure you're working with an attorney that has that startup knowledge, can really help guide you in that corporate structure to make sure that you're protecting yourself and your company as you go along. Another area for many startups and small businesses is intellectual property. Now, what intellectual property you have depends on what kind of industry you work in, but everyone from your business name to your logo to software that you have to process procedure potentially, I say potentially, to products, physical products that you may develop. All of that is intellectual property. Some can be protected, some cannot be, but it's important that you're working with an attorney to make sure that you're protecting your identity, protecting your intellectual property, because again, this is one of those areas where if you don't do this right from the very start, you're going to run into more trouble. And there's times where missing a step on your intellectual property may not be able to be fixed in the long run. So make sure that you're working with a licensed attorney on all intellectual property issues. So as someone who works with many startups, and again, I tend to oversee that legal structure side of things. I don't represent the client, but I tend to oversee that legal function. But a lot of times I'm brought in after the business has been incorporated. They've worked with an attorney. They've done all that work. They're incorporated in Delaware, typical state for a lot of startups. And I am brought in a couple stages in to where I don't have that full insight as into what was intended by the owner or the CEO and what the lawyer did. So when you have an operations team or you bring someone in for operations, make sure they fully understand that conversation that went on between you and your lawyers to know exactly what they did and why they did it that way. Because that's going to go a long way in making sure that other aspects of your operations, especially when it comes to tax, is all set up in accordance with what you and your attorney agreed on. Now, here's an area which, again, from my work in dealing with startups and small businesses, that I really learned that a lot of attorneys who do incorporation, they don't do the next step. And if you're not working with someone in your organization that has that operational experience, maybe everything is just getting handed off to an executive assistant once the attorney's done. But there's a key part that is often overlooked for startups, and that is registering your business locally. If you have any kind of office or storefront, there's different licenses that you're going to have. So make sure that you have someone who is checking that box. You don't want to deal with fines, misinspections, all that type of stuff. So you really want to make sure that you have someone who's doing that research of exactly what your business needs to be doing locally so that you're a licensed business and making sure you're following all local regulations when it comes to operating a business in that city, county, and state. Human resources is a big regulatory issue, as we all know. When you're talking about W-2s and 1099s, dealing with immigration issues, there are all sorts of kinds of regulatory issues that come along with human resources. So again, you got to make sure that you're working with an HR attorney, working with an HR expert who kind of knows these legal issues. But you want to make sure that you're starting everything right from the start. HR, again, it's one of those areas where if you're not making the right steps at the very, very beginning, it's going to cost you more time and more money to redo them than just making sure that you're talking to the expert who can really direct you and making sure that what you're doing is done right from the very beginning. Your finances. That's often not thought about a regulatory issue, but as I kind of already mentioned earlier, how you're incorporated and how you're structured, all of these things can affect many aspects of your finances. How you keep your books, how you do banking, keeping investors in line, how you file your taxes, what can be included as write-offs, etc. All of these aspects of how your company was incorporated will absolutely affect your finances and how they're managed. So again, whenever possible, you want to bring these parties together. You want to bring your CPA in. You want to bring the attorney in who incorporated, and making sure that everyone understands how this organization is set up, the reasons why, and make sure that everyone from their parts, they're often separate, right? Your accountant, your attorney, et cetera, your operations manager, they're all play different roles, but they all can become and do become connected. So it is important to make sure that everyone is on the exact same page as far as these regulatory issues go, and make sure that they're doing the right things to get your business where it needs to go and it operates effectively. Thank you for watching. If you're looking for more guidance with your internal operations, I invite you to learn more about my business operations program by clicking the link in the description box. I'll see you next time.